Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille, here with Ken.
Hey guys, what's happening? We're on the road. We're in Franklin, Tennessee.
We are. We're having a good time. We're loving Franklin. We have a great Airbnb here. We're with my family. So there's a bunch of kids running around here, my brother's kids. So it's been a lot of fun.
It's great. It's great to have young energy in the house. There's 10 people in this house.
Yes. There's a lot of people, and Ken's dealing with all my crazy family members.
It's totally fine.
You're a little out of the screen, so you might want to.
Okay. How do we fix that?
I don't know. Put it more, like that way. Okay. So, but we've been having a good time here. We're going to check out Nashville again tomorrow and go from there.
Yeah. So let's jump into it.
Well, I don't think we should jump into it quite yet because we haven't went over the fact that I have a webinar coming up on Wednesday. So for those of you that want to check it out, I'm going to be talking about, things I've seen on the road that you can profit in real estate that a lot of you probably haven't heard of before. A lot of these I haven't known before, but I've really, both of us has picked up ideas along the way, just seeing all these smaller towns. So if you go to kenmcroy.com/webinar to sign up, it's free.
That's right. And we got a happy hour tonight.
We do. For our Inner Circle members, we have Jason Hartman on, and we will be coming to you live for that.
Yeah, don't miss that. 5 p.m. That's going to be fun.
5 p.m. Arizona time.
Arizona time. Mountain Standard Time.
Yes. And then also, we have our Twitter question of the week. Steve, if you can pull that up for us. Awesome. It's super hard to read.
Let me blow this up a little.
I was going to say, I can't read it.
There we go.
He said, what are some unique ways you're investing money during times of inflation? Antonio replied, into networking by building my audience and going to meetups and conferences. I think meeting people and connections are more important than trying to maximize them.
That's a good point. There's a lot of people right now dealing with, inflation. And sometimes it might feel like you're alone, but you're not, of course. It's kind of the talk. So the more you can network, the more you can find out what other people are doing. And there's a lot of cool strategies that people are kind of rolling out right now. I've been watching a lot of YouTube on this. There are lots and lots and lots of ways to not get gobbled up by this. I don't foresee it getting any better either.
No, not right now. And Steve, can you pull up the next one for us, please? It says it's important to do your own research and consult with a financial advisor to find the best investment strategy for your specific situation. Remember, investing always carries some level of risk. So how do you feel about financial advisors, Ken?
Well, I guess it depends on who they are and what they do. If they're trying to sell products like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, insurance products, and those kinds of things, then you just got to understand that that's their angle. But if they are truly, a lot of times they're trying to, on this channel, I'm not against financial planners or wealth managers at all. I just think that they're not incentivized to have you go into things like real estate because of the tax advantages. They don't get paid if their client goes and leaves and goes into real estate. And also they don't get paid if they go out and buy physical gold or silver or something like that. You have to obviously go out and buy those kinds of things from your dealer. Now you can do that through some of these plans. Don't get me wrong. But, so I think there's a balance there. There's nothing wrong with them.
It's like a realtor. You just got to get a good one. That's the biggest thing. And they're not super easy to find. Just
pay attention to how they're getting paid.
Yes. All right. And then Steve, pull up the third comment, please. LaRue says gold and silver, which I know Ken's a big fan of.
Yeah. And now, guys, before we jump off of that topic, I have a lot of gold and a lot of silver physical. So you think about, we've had Chris Martenson on this channel before. Chris Martenson talks about the three types of wealth. There's, primary, secondary, and tertiary. So call it level 1, level 2, level 3. So gold mines would be, the actual gold would be in the ground, timber, water, oil, that kind of stuff. That would be primary. The second level would be companies that pull that out of the ground. So that would be secondary. So think of like Weyerhaeuser harvesting trees. So that would be investing into, say, Weyerhaeuser. The third, tertiary, is the stock. So when you're looking at gold or silver and and somebody says, I can buy you an ETF, or I think it's electronic traded funds, I believe. That's a derivative of real gold. So you actually have paper gold. You don't actually have real physical gold. And the whole point of gold and silver is to actually have the physical stuff. So if you need it, for example, let's say, you have some coins in your pocket and you get on a plane, you go to Mexico, you can pull those out and you can get pesos. Same thing with the euros or wherever you are. So, gold is God's money. It's universal. It's not money. It's not physical paper. So that's the important thing around gold and silver. But I'm a big fan of gold and silver. Now, it's also not an investment. So I don't believe that you should try to time it and sell it. So I'm buying it to actually not get diluted with the US dollar. So, as I buy, I believe that I'm hedging inflation, and it's real money. Dollars are getting printed. So as Kiyosaki likes to say, I only invest in things that you can't print. So just stick with that and you'll be fine.
Yep, absolutely. So make sure, you respond to Ken on Twitter. He posts his own Twitter. He selects the answers. So he's very into all of that. So check that out. Or X, it's called now, I guess we should say.
That's right.
It's not really called Twitter anymore. It's X.
X.
All right. Anyways, let's jump into the topic today. Before we do, make sure you hit the like button. We love that. So today we're going to be talking about 6 tips from experienced landlords. So these tips are not ones that you've probably heard before, or if they are, they're in much more detail than you've heard before. We see a lot of people getting into real estate, and sometimes even people that have been in real estate a long time, and they do a lot of things wrong. And we want to make sure that you don't make those same mistakes, or if you are, you're able to correct them. Because the biggest thing that we see, I think, is people, they start to get into real estate and they make these mistakes and then they say, real estate sucks. I hate it. I hate dealing with tenants. I'm done. Right. And the reason I think for that a lot of the time is because they just didn't do, they didn't do it right.
Well, it could be. I think a lot of times people think that real estate is not a business. It's like buying a stock or buying a shirt, like it's a business. There's actual real people involved. There's real agreements, there's real things that come up with people, hardships, and real maintenance and real vendors and all that kind of stuff. So if you don't have the appetite for it and you just want somebody to manage your money, then real estate is not for you. And I think, most people, a lot of people have the only experience they have with real estate is buying their home. So if you and of course, this is the first thing, right? It's not exactly like buying your home, but if you think of it this way, your home, more than likely, with most of you listening, is where most of your wealth is if you own it. If you own a home and you bought it some time ago, let's say, who knows how long, and you've owned it for a while, it is, if you just look at things objectively, probably where most of your financial wealth is. Now, you might not be able to have access to it because it's sitting in the form of equity. Maybe you bought it 10 years ago and it's gone up in value. So now, of course, you won't realize that or recognize that until you sell it. But the reality of where most people's wealth are in the entire country is in real estate. So, but you have to know the difference between buying something personally for your home use, let's say, or, something for an investment, because they are different, but the concept is the same. So if the majority of your wealth is sitting in your primary residence, why wouldn't you go out and just replicate that again, but have somebody else pay it off instead of you? That's the difference.
You're only like really saving for that down payment.
Yeah, it's that different. So also, you don't always have to have a down payment, because a lot of the people that got into the game, including myself, all they did was find a good real estate deal, and then they found somebody to help them buy it. So that would be what you would call an investor. So you could find an investor, you could find a home that, so let's say, to purchase, you can put a renter in there and it can cash flow, and you can do all of that with just a little bit of education. It is similar but very different from your primary home, and I think that's the lesson number one. Don't buy things like it is your home. There, right?
Yeah, like, I think people make the mistake of trying to buy appliances and finishes and flooring like it's their own home. They want it to be the most amazing thing ever, which of course you want your rentals to be nice, but tenants are never going to treat it like you do. And they're probably only going to live there for a year or two. And it usually is a stepping block for them to either rent a nicer place or buy their own place. And so you don't want to invest like it's your home. So, mistakes I see people make is, putting in like expensive flooring or the prime appliances. You don't do any of that in your apartment units. You put in nice stuff, but not like the top of the line stuff you'd put in your house.
Right. It's a rental, guys. And, it's not, your renters, in my experience, is renters do not abuse the facilities, but there's no reason for you to put in sub-zeros and granite and all that stuff, even though there's a case that a lot of people will say you can get more rent for. Mostly brokers will say that. But the reality is, if it's well maintained and it's in really good condition and clean, then you're probably going to get maximum rents. Now, however, that does open itself up to a value add scenario. There are lots of those. So if something is dated, let's say built in the 80s or the 90s, and you have, the old almond appliances, let's say, and the old Formica countertops or things like that, there are things you can do to upgrade that home. But there are lots of things that you can do differently. So for example, a Formica countertop after 15 or 20 years is going to have cuts on it, could have cigarette burns on it, could have chips, could have all that kind of stuff. Now, for your home, you probably would put, granite in, let's say, to upgrade that. Well, for a rental, what I would do is I would hire a company to come in and do the completely spray it and put a resin top in. So you can actually have it sprayed just like you paint a car with the resin top, and you might get one or two more renters in there. And that process alone is, just a couple $100. So, that in contrast to a couple grand for granite, those are the kinds of things that you can do. And your renter is not going to pay you a lot more money if it looks nice and it's clean. They're not going to go in and go, oh my gosh, this is granite, I'm going to give you another $50 or $100 more a month. They're not going to do that. On the other side of that, if you have old appliances, they might not rent. Those are things that oftentimes that you do need to upgrade, but you don't have to buy them new. We just bought a fridge, side-by-side stainless for what's that, $500?
$600, yeah.
$600. And it was 1 year old, and it was perfect.
You can get them used. You can get them at the dented but new store. They always have those outlets where they have dented items. Now, granted, you might not want to put that in your house.
Right.
Put it in your rental. And the other thing is that when they break them, you're not as upset, right? Like if somebody scratches your countertop you spent $200 to fix up, you're not as mad as, they somehow dent the granite or the quartz or break a piece off, there. So I think it's really important. And, and people always ask me like, well, don't you worry about damage? And it's like, well, the security deposit covers a lot of the damage because you're getting like a full month's rent. But if you start putting in super expensive stuff, then it probably doesn't cover it. And you probably do have to worry about damage.
It doesn't matter. That stuff doesn't help you rent. That's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at what point do you spend more than you actually need to get the same amount of rent. And that's where your head needs to be. Another one is carpet. We don't like carpet. Especially with pets.
We're going to get to those things later. He Ken's always just jumping ahead.
But those are things that I would do in rentals, not at homes.
Yep. So the second one is the security deposit. So security deposits are critical. And I see a lot of new landlords not getting ample security deposits, not doing move-in and move-out forms. And their reasoning for it is they feel bad asking, or they feel like the person renting doesn't have the money to pay them a security deposit. But they're super important because it is your first line of recourse for damage. And there a lot of times is some kind of damage that you're going to have to pay for, especially if they live there a couple of years.
And one thing to clarify here, there's a difference between a fee and a deposit. Okay, so there's no such thing as a non-refundable deposit. You think about that. That's an oxymoron. All right, so deposits are deposits, and they're also the tenant's money. Don't forget. So a deposit, in theory, just if you put one down or anyone put one down, is literally a deposit. It's not the landlord's money. What it is, it's an insurance policy for things that might happen later. Fees are very different. So you might want to charge a fee for them to submit a credit application. That is a fee. You have a cost associated with that fee. It's not a deposit. So deposits are tenants' money. And so sometimes it's always good to have at least a half month or a full month. But sometimes you might want to work with your tenant over a period of time. And we've done that before. Mm-hmm. So in other words, let's say your rent's $1,000 and the deposit's $1,000. You could say, why don't you give me $1,500 for the rent, $500 for the deposit, and then work with them at $100 a month for the next 5 months, or 6 months, or 5 months, sorry. And then now you've got $1,000 on their lease agreement that is actually the tenant's. And then the tenant knows that they have that on deposit with you, and they want that money back. So there's an incentive for them to actually keep the place nice, because they know that you have $1,000 to fix damage. So what happens a lot of times is the landlords, and we've seen this, they might only charge $100 or $200, and then there's let's say a big ink stain on a carpet, or something's broken. Well, then just to fix that might be several $100. Now you don't have enough money because the deposit's gone, and now as a landlord you've actually lost money, and then you actually submit that to collections, and it gets kind of ugly with the tenant themselves. That's why it's better to have bigger deposits.
It is. That way you can just, use that money. And even those of you that run Airbnbs, I know that damage is common in Airbnb, and Airbnb says they're going to cover it. They don't cover a lot of it. There's nothing wrong with asking for your tenant for a little bit of a security deposit. We pay a lot of security deposits when we stay in these Airbnbs. Not a lot of money, usually like $500 or something, but it's a buffer for them to charge for incidentals that get damaged while we're here.
Yeah. The other thing is you got to check with your state, because there are regulations as to how much you can charge on your security deposit. So make sure that you're in compliance. But I know you should be safe with 1 month's free.
But you also have to
1 month's deposit. Sorry.
You also have to remember to do the move in and move out form. And I didn't do this the first 2 years I was a landlord, and luckily I didn't have any major damage about this. But Ken made me aware. Everyone needs to move in, do a list of all the damage that's there, what's in poor condition, good condition, any damage, pictures, all of that. Because if you don't have them fill out anything, they can just say, it was like that when I moved in, and you don't really have any way to prove that it wasn't. And this
is protection for both sides, by the way.
Correct. That's true, because for the tenant, if the stovetops are burned and you don't get an opportunity to list that, you could be charged for that.
So we were in Kansas City, we went to the Billy Joel and Stevie Nicks concert, and we rented a really nice house downtown. And we went in and there was a bunch of little damage like this. So there were some holes in the wall. This is a really nice neighborhood, really nice house. Paid quite a bit for it actually per night. Airbnb, however. But within the first 2 hours, I walked around and just took pictures with my phone of, like some drywall patching, some scratches on the
damage,
floor.
Yeah.
The screen,
furniture.
Yeah, the screen, there's stains on the furniture, and there are some screens that were ripped and torn. And this is a really nice neighborhood. And all I did was I sent it to the property manager and I said, listen, I don't want to be charged for this stuff. And here you go. And they just, within the first 2 hours, they just walk around. It was super easy to do, take photos. So I only took 6 or 8, 10 photos and sent it to the property manager. This is really important stuff, guys, because what happens is memories fade, people forget, they go in, and you don't want to get charged as a tenant either on something that the landlord hasn't done. In that particular case, that's exactly what happened. So it can happen either way.
And, Daniel had mentioned too that he likes to charge 2 months of rent for security deposit. One thing he asked how to check that's unlawful. Every state's different.
Landlord tenant law, and it just check your landlord tenant law in your state.
But if you make your security deposit too high, people aren't going to want to pay it because they're going to say, okay, why do I have to tie up $5,000 with you, for security damage to my 2-bedroom unit I'm renting? So you just have to keep in mind that you want to be reasonable with your security deposit, unless you have some kind, unless you feel, you have really nice things and you need to protect them, but you just need to know that could cost you tenants because, for me, I honestly wouldn't want to pay 2 months worth of this security deposit because rent's going up. So it's getting expensive. So that turns into more money than when rent was a lot lower. And that's how I look at it too. Rent's gone up. So now my 1 month security deposit's a lot bigger than it even used to be for the stuff that really is pretty much the same. Yeah. So just be careful with that. You don't want to be too high because you will lose tenants over that. So tip number 3 is make the lease work for you. So we always talk about having a really solid lease. That is a pretty obvious tip. You need to have a solid lease, but you also need to make the lease work. So what I mean by that is a good example is how many months it is. So I used to just do standard 12-month leases when I started because I didn't know any better, right? So what would happen is I would have a lot of them expiring at the same time, or maybe I'd have them expiring in a bad time. Maybe they expired January 1. Well, who the heck wants to move in on January 1, right? So I started doing leases that were like 13, 14 months if it worked better for me, or even, 10, 11 months if it works better for me. So keep that in mind when you're negotiating with your tenant. When is this lease going to expire? And is that a good time for me to have the lease expire?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of scenarios on this, Danille hit most of them, but the thing is, think about this, guys. When is it the hardest time for you to lease something? So in Phoenix, it's obviously summer. Let's call it July or August. So the last thing that you would want is for a tenant to move out at the end of June. And then you have to try to fill that property in July and August when it's very hot. So same thing on the opposite side of it, when the weather's, let's say, bad. We had a situation where, we were in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and the Airbnb person that we knew had rented their house through the summer, and they missed one of the biggest weeks, which was Ironman. Which the Ironman, lots of people go there for the Ironman, and so that 2-week period when everyone there is a high premium week. So they missed that because they had rented this thing, for a longer period of time at a much lower rate. So there are things that go on in your individual markets, whether it's seasonality or it could be just when you're there or not there, because sometimes you can ask a tenant what they want. But if you're in an environment where rents are moving up very quickly, the last thing you want is a long lease as a landlord. If you're a tenant, you want a long lease because you want to lock your rent in for as long as you can. But if the rents, if your area is going through some flux and you've got a lot of new product coming in, or maybe there's a big employer that moved out, or let's say a military base or something, and you have vacancies, then you're going to want to lock the tenant in longer. So now it's not, of course, fail safe, and it's not a guarantee that they're going to stay. However, it is good for you to have in an environment where rents are fluctuating and it's hard to find renters. You're going to want longer term leases. And in environments where there's, they're lining up, then you're going to probably want shorter leases, because you could take advantage of the higher rents when those people move out.
Absolutely. And also, make sure in your lease you have that they will pay for all fines from the HOA or the city.
Yeah, this is a big one, because as you guys probably might know, the HOAs are they're very active right now.
Very active. They love it.
For some reason, their expenses are going up too. So if you guys don't know what an HOA is, it's a homeowners association. And the landscaping costs and the pavement costs and the lighting costs and all the things, the water, all that stuff, guys, it's all going up. So, unfortunately, if you live in an HOA and their costs are going up, they are going to look for ways to increase their revenues to cover some of those costs. And sometimes those are through violations and things like that. Most of the time, it's just going to be through dues increases.
Yep. And make sure if you're liking this content, you hit the like button. We love it. It helps us out. All right. Number 4 landlord tip. Pets are okay, for those of you that are wondering, but you have to make sure your floors are made for them. Yeah. So we see a lot of people that don't want pets. We see it on Airbnb. We see it on regular, landlords. And we personally feel that that's a mistake, because most of my tenants have have pets, and a lot of Ken's tenants have pets as well.
Yeah, we have a pet policy at our company. Now, don't forget, guys, we're not just saying all things being equal. You can discriminate against pets. You can't against people, but you can against pets. In other words, you can have breed restrictions. You can charge deposits. You can charge monthly pet rent. So you need to look at this as an opportunity to be able to accommodate the renter and also make some money off of it. So, just as an example, just in the Airbnb world, we're seeing anywhere from $40 to $75 to have a pet, for even a weekend. And pet owners pay this. So, same thing with hotels. So the hotels have gotten kind of wise around this, where they're saying a lot of people travel with their pets, and so a lot of times they obviously just won't allow them. So you're missing out on the occupancy, but you're also missing out on the revenue. So there is a way to do this, accommodate. You got to be careful of aggressive breeds and big animals, let's say, and you have to have agreements for this, especially if they're longer term, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to make sure your floors are made for them too, right? Yeah. So, I was talking to a girl, and she basically let people move into her house, and she had all wood floors. They had animals. The dogs peed on the wood. They didn't clean it up right away, and it warped all the wood, right? So she had about $30,000 in damages because she had wood throughout the house. Well, what does she do? Is she puts back in more new wood floors, right? And so you have to understand, wood in a rental is tough. Wood is very finicky, and it's not the best thing for a rental property. There's a lot of issues with it.
Real wood,
yeah, correct. Real wood.
The faux wood, which looks nice, right? You guys can get.
Right, but if you're trying to be, we want the nicest floors and all of that. Wood is rough, and wood is very rough when it comes to pets and kids and everything else. So you just need to be mindful of the flooring that you have in your unit. And, we really love vinyl plank, for those of you that are, debating on what to get. I had laminate in one of my units. It flooded, and it wasn't, the flooring was not water resistant. So I had to rip up all the floor in the kitchen. Well, I put down vinyl plank, and the good thing about vinyl plank is it's water resistant. It is it's great for the animal situation. It's cheap and it looks nice.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of
a
where.
good point. And don't forget, guys, there's also water leaks and things that also happen. The other one that works really well is a neutral tile. So you can put in tiles, ceramic tiles, and they're pretty reasonable. And with a little grout to make sure that, you can have problems with the grouts, but that's another good way to, not have to replace the floor each time. The floor sneaks up on you, especially after a couple renters. You might find that it has scratches or of course you've got some water damage or pet damage or something like that. Each time this could be a, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 issue.
Jay just said I paid $1,300, or I just put down 1,300 square feet in vinyl in my rental. I love it. The crap under the carpets was unbelievable.
Yeah, it can get nasty, guys.
Carpets are nasty. Like, I only have carpets in 2 of my rentals, and they both were there before I purchased them. And I will be ripping them up once one of my tenants ruins them, because the tenants don't like them because they're kind of, known to be kind of dirty. You can't really clean carpet that well. And secondly is that, a tenant's not going to want to pay for you to re-put down the carpet. They're not going to believe that you need to re-put down the carpet after they leave. So much easier to just do some kind of hard flooring.
You think about this. Danille had this happen at one of the rentals. If you have carpet and the dogs are going to the bathroom, well, let's say our cat, it seeps in through the carpet, into the pad, onto the subfloor. So what happened was when we pulled up the subfloor, the carpet, you saw the spots had on the subfloor itself. So clearly the carpet's ruined. And think about what a carpet cleaner does, right? It doesn't clean the pad, and it most certainly doesn't clean the subfloor. Mm-hmm. So, so when we pull it up, there was about a dozen spots all over the subfloor. Mm-hmm. So you could see where the dogs had gone, the bathroom, or the animals, I should say. The carpet was trash. There's no way you can carpet clean that out.
No. And now, when I do get into a rental that somebody that had pets and it does smell like dog pee or cat urine, I just get it a super thorough cleaning, because I know none of my floor is going to absorb that. So you just give it a super thorough cleaning, run the ozone machine to get the odor out, and you're good to go. But on carpet, man, it's going to just hold on to that. And wood, anything that's porous, that's going to absorb.
That's right. Yeah. So it's just not a good idea, especially for any kind of a rental.
So Lyle said, I use all vinyl plank and tile. I always go for durability over how it looks, except I expect tenants to trash the place and make sure the floor is durable and scratch resistant. I learned it the hard way. Yeah, so we're trying to make it so you guys don't learn the hard way. And I do like what he said over, durability over and cost over looks, because when I did have that issue in my kitchen and I had to rip up the floor, I made the mistake of sending some samples to some of my girlfriends that are more, interior decorated inclined. Now you can't do, and they're sending me all these options of this super nice stuff that they would put in their house. And I was trying to explain to them that it's a rental and I want to put that in there, and they just weren't understanding it. So you want it to look good, but it doesn't need to look amazing. Like, if it looks like a 7 out of 10, you're good to go. If it's durable, cost effective, and scratch resistant. Yep. So, and water resistance is a big one, because I learned the hard way on that. That's why I had to rip out all my flooring and make sure there was no mold and all that stuff. So it's better if it's water resistant from the get-go. So tip number 5. It's worth the money to invest in professional photos.
Yep. This is true, guys. Yeah. Like, back in the day, people used to actually physically go and look at the place, but that has changed a lot. As you guys know, I mean, like, just look at the Airbnb. I don't know about you guys, but nobody looks at Airbnbs before they rent them, hardly. So, it's the same. It's moving that way with all rentals. So having really, really nice photos is very, very, very important. And you can tell the difference. I know you guys could tell. You could tell on on realtor websites, you can see the difference. It makes a huge difference if you're just obviously attracting people to rent that way. Also, you should, of course, have it so that it's super easy for them to apply and rent online as well, along with those photos.
Yeah. And, the biggest thing too is there's a lot more competition. So you need to stand out. And the one thing about Airbnb is all those little Airbnb courses, they really teach people how to zone in on their photos. So what we found out is that Airbnb has like the best photos, people that run professional Airbnbs, but they always add like a titch of bright color, and that kind of snags your eye when you're looking. So when you're taking these professional pictures, I like to do it when one of my tenants is decorated really well. So I like to wait. And then when I get a tenant that's just decked the place out, then I like to go in with their permission, of course, and do the professional photos, or when it's empty. But you can't, sometimes you have trouble just doing it on the fly because some of your tenants, they have like old furniture and gym equipment in the living room. And, it's kind of harder to do at that time. So I recommend doing it when it's empty, or when you have a tenant that's just really decked out. The place. It looks really nice.
And there is another option. You can stage it. So there are companies that will bring things over there and stage it for you. Obviously, like if somebody moves out of a home, you guys see the difference. If you see a home online that has a big vacant living room or bedroom, it's very different if there's just a few things in there. So it does make sense to stage, because keep in mind, if this is a long-term rental, what you're looking for is a set of photos that you can use over and over and over and over and over.
Right.
So this is a one-time investment to get the photos you need, unless, of course, you do some kind of remodel. But that's what this is for. It's worth the investment right up front to make sure that you have that.
Absolutely. And Headwater was asking, what do you think of a feature wall? So a wall that's kind of a different color than all the other walls.
Yeah.
I'd stay away from stuff like that, because you could be turning down a tenant that doesn't like your feature wall or doesn't like that color or has a green couch and it's not going to go. We like to keep everything very neutral. When tan was kind of in, a lot of things were tan. Now white's coming in. So I've been painting my places white. I have one place that's like a light gray, but these light colors, that kind of go with any kind of furniture, because the tenant's not going to want to get new furniture just to move into your place. And some people are very particular that everything looks, matches and looks a certain way. So I just keep it really neutral and then just keep it simple.
Yeah, I agree. Guys, things change. You can go way back. For those of you who are older, you remember Harvest Gold, avocado green, shag carpet. They used to have red and green shag carpet, if you could imagine that. And then things moved into, kind of the black appliances and the almond appliances. Now, if you see an almond appliance, you realize it's probably in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. So you start to see these things, make their way. And those are, Danille's right. You just go right down the middle and let the tenant decide, because those little things can be the difference of whether they rent or buy.
And then if they want to paint a feature wall, they can. Like, I'm always okay with my tenants doing stuff as long as they agree that they'll pay for me to turn it back how it was before if I want to.
To an extent, I will tell you,
Okay.
I've been burned on this before, guys. I've had people, where you say, yeah, do what you want. And then they paint like literally like dark blue, in the living room, and, maybe red in the bedroom or something. And, it can be then they almost never paint it well on their way out, if they even do. So you're stuck with that. And it's not easy to go from dark blue back to, let's say, a light color,
Somebody with more experience than me. I haven't had that experience yet. I'm sure I will.
Yeah, be careful.
All right. And landlord tip number 6 is to keep your yard and house maintenance low. So I think sometimes people, they want to put in a lot of really nice landscaping, or they want to put in real grass, or they want to, put in a pool. And what you have to keep in mind is that, a lot of times the tenant's not going to keep up on that maintenance.
Most of the time.
So
yeah,
you either need to bill it in so that you're having somebody professionally do it, or you need to keep it super low maintenance so the tenant doesn't have much to do.
Yeah. Ideally, if you have something that's like that, the HOA takes care of it. Otherwise, you now have another situation. One of Danille's rentals had grass that, the sprinkler system was a mess and it was flooding, and then there wasn't getting enough light because she had a big orange tree there. So eventually she just went and found and put in that fake grass.
I did. And then that way the tenant only has to keep up with desert landscape trim, which needs to be landscaped like once every 3 months or something.
Yeah. And water's getting expensive, guys. So, water bills are a big deal. So converting something over, eliminating the grass is not necessarily a bad idea. Obviously, pets are fine walking around in areas that are not grass. Now, that is, of course, if you're in an environment where that's costing you a lot of money and it's a big pain in the butt. But generally, these backyards that our renters maintain can be oftentimes very difficult to maintain.
Yeah, like they don't want to mow the grass. You know what I mean? They don't want to pay for water to water the grass if you're in a more desert landscape area. So all these things, the tenants complain about. So your best bet is to either, hire somebody to mow the grass and just build that in, or, put in like a lot of patio space or desert landscape or something that really minimizes how much they're going to have to spend on water, how much time they're going to have to spend on mowing the grass, that kind of thing. And, and if you have a pool, you're going to want to, build the cost of the pool person to clean it and maintain it into the rent, because you don't want to get that pool back. Because here's the other thing is when you actually have to show the place, you have to show it with dead and dying grass. You have to show it with an overgrown lawn. You have to show it with a green pool. You have to show it with all these things because that's how the tenant took care of it. So you don't want to have to do that. So you have to either make it super low maintenance or hire the professionals to keep it up to date.
Yeah, we bought a property once with a really, really bad spa in the back. Remember that one?
Oh yeah, it was like
and
the funny thing is the HOA actually has like a nice hot tub, like a 2-minute walk from the house, but they really wanted their own hot tub.
So we were like, oh my gosh, this thing is a mess and it's going to cost a lot of money to maintain. It looked like it was older. So we actually ripped the whole thing out and put a really nice brick patio area in where the renter could put, his dining set. And it's obviously, imagine it was expensive to do that. But then once that's over, now you've eliminated that reoccurring potential problem that we could have had.
Absolutely. So those are your 6 landlord tips. So I hope it's super helpful. Make sure you ask any questions in the chat. We're going to jump over to our inner circle. You can go to kensinnercircle.com, kenbecker.com/join to sign up. And for this, we do happy hours every month with Ken and a guest. And we also answer all your questions live or by email. All right. So Joe is asking, I want to rent my basement in my single family home for extra income. I worry about my neighbors complaining that I'm illegally renting my basement. If I put a bathroom and kitchen in the basement so I can try to rent it, I'm assuming I need to get permits for that. Do you think it'll be okay to rent it?
Yeah, I mean, no, guys, this is what's the difference of you just have, pretend like it's a friend of yours that's moving in, and paying you rent. There are some things I think that you have to look at, obviously, but I can't see one problem with that. Can you?
No, as long as you're allowed to rent your place, which most places are, unless you have some kind of HOA or something that says you're not allowed to rent, then you can't.
Well, this is different. You're actually living there, I believe.
Yeah, but there are HOAs that you're not allowed to rent yet. I don't even think if you're living there.
I don't know about that. That seems like a private property right issue. But I can see if you're not living there and renting it, how the HOA might step in. But if you're actually living there and you're just getting a roommate and they're paying you rent, I don't think that there's much they can do to that. Make sure that you do get a lease. It sounds to me like they might not have a separate entrance, so you might have some issues there. And of course, I saw if you are running plumbing and electric, of course, you have to get permits for that if you don't already have that down there. You might have that down there already, which means that you wouldn't. But if you're running all that kind of stuff, it's putting additional power and water capacity issues to the existing system. So you do have to have that taken a look at. And that's just a safety thing anyway. Be careful with that.
Absolutely. So our next question comes from Barbara. She said, is there a limit of renting out places in a home? I was thinking of creating lofts above the living room for people to sleep and renting those out long term. I have a 2-bed patio home and that will add 2 more rooms. I just want to understand what is legal.
Yeah, I can't see why it wouldn't, as long as you're in the existing space. That can you?
Yeah, I mean, it might be harder to rent than you think, depending on the kind of space that they have. But I wouldn't think that there would be any kind of problem with it. You're just going to have to make sure with that many people living in that small of a space that you really have, your house rules mapped out.
Yeah. You're overloading certain things, like the kitchen and the bathrooms and that kind of stuff.
But there are legal limits to how many people can live in a house, right? I mean,
I don't know.
Really? Okay.
I think there are occupancy standards, but I can't imagine that that's going to be a problem.
Okay. So Ken is asking, have you ever thought about the fact rates might not go back down and this is our new baseline? What would happen then?
Well, for me, it would be exactly how my whole career has been. So the rates today are almost exactly what I started with. So I've done almost most of my investing has been at rates at this price. So I think if you are new to the game, say in the last 7 or 8 years, then they're very high for you. But if you've been investing a long time, they're not. So I think rates are average. I still think they're good. 6 and 7% interest rates, while everybody's freaking out about them, they're not bad. The issue, of course, is the prices are higher. That's the difference. So the seller, this is kind of the whole point of the higher rates. We're going to see some adjustment on values. We already have on commercial for sure. And, you're going to see more people, I believe, to buy less because of the higher rates. And that's what the Fed's trying to do. Let's not forget their whole point of raising rates is to lower inflation. And shelter, which is rent and home ownership, is in that as part of that CPI or the Consumer Price Index. So that is intentionally what they're doing, and I have no problem if they stay this way for a while.
So Kyle is asking, have you seen adding juice bars or coffee stands work well in apartment buildings? It seems like that would help the cash flow.
Yeah, I haven't. I've seen it tried. Trust me, we've tried everything. We've done ATM machines. We've done all kinds of stuff. The issue becomes the manning of it. So don't forget the overhead. So yes, it makes sense if somebody, obviously, I would imagine that you like juice bars, but not everyone does. And then not everyone knows to come into the clubhouse for it. And then, of course, you got to man it. You could, in theory, have one of your staff members do it if the property is large enough. But then you have all the products; they're perishable. You're providing, food. So there are other things that you have to consider. So
it would be different if it was like at the bottom of a retail center, right? Like in
downtown. That's
or
different,
something.
But that wouldn't be you doing it. That would be you having a store attached to an apartment building. That's different.
Got it. Yeah, it'd be really hard to manage that, I feel like. I think I've seen places try those things.
They have tried.
So Lawrence from the Inner Circle is asking, I need to move. My home is at a very low rate, but it does not cash flow. I'd be feeding it monthly. In this circumstance, should I sell? I'm not going to get a better rate. However, rents could go up. I'm only short a few $100s a month. But I'm in Mississippi and the area is not booming either.
Sorry to hear that. It's more of first of all, I believe if you have a really low rate, you have an asset. But if it doesn't cash flow, you're in a bit of a quandary, which is basically what you just asked. If you don't feel like the market is trending up. So I did this exact thing in Oklahoma, where, we have been in Oklahoma for 10 or 15 years, let's say. And we haven't really seen a lot of growth there in Oklahoma City or in some areas of Tulsa, let's say. And so we've chosen to sell and move that money into markets that are growing better. So we've already made those decisions. So I don't know what's going on other than your negative cash flow, which of course is not the whole purpose of buying real estate. You obviously must have known this when you first did it. But if you're not seeing rent growth and you're not seeing any potential rent growth coming, then you might be better off, reinvesting that somewhere else where it's a little more progressive.
Absolutely. Tony is asking, how do you handle the stress of investing other people's money? I think there's a lot of people going through that right now. A lot of these newer syndicators, it can be very stressful in times like this.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's a huge responsibility, obviously, to manage other people's money. So you have to treat it just like you would treat your own. So for us, we always invest alongside of everyone's money. So our money is treated the same as anyone's. And so the way I manage my stress around that is through buying correctly. And I think that that's what a lot of people forget is what creates stress are blind spots when people bought. That's what creates stress. And so that just comes with, experience. If you have a problem, then the best thing by far you can do is notify the investors and let them know what you're experiencing. So that's the way to do it. It's really, you got to be super transparent. But for us, we take it very seriously. And in fact, it's probably the only thing that stresses me out is, when we're raising money from somebody else, I want to make sure that it's invested very well and that it's invested in an area that, and according to a business plan that I've really thought through and works. And that's not always the case. So it's a great question.
So Joel V is asking, what type of tenant should I look for so another 2008 doesn't happen again? They're worried that they're going to lose their tenant if they can't pay rent.
Yeah, that's another good question. So obviously you can't discriminate against tenants. So the way, it has to work is when you advertise, you run you run applications and all that, and people come in. You can look at things as to where they're working, how much they're making, those kinds of things. Now, I'll tell you one of the craziest things, if you think about it. So I've got a number of senior properties, and seniors often aren't working, obviously, right? They're on retirement. They have typically a lot of times fixed incomes. And so when we're taking applications on somebody that actually doesn't have a job, you really got to put your thinking cap on. Okay, so what are the things that you want to see? So in that particular case, they have to produce some like things like their retirement accounts or check stubs of money that they have coming from other parties. So surprisingly, as you would imagine, a lot of the seniors that live in our communities have multiple streams of income. They have multiple buckets of retirement accounts, and they have different things coming in. Like Medicaid, Social Security, pensions, or things like that. So, it can go beyond just that one job. But, the one thing to do is just think about the industries that you believe are going to do really, really well in the next few years.
But it really does come down more to the tenant than the job, right? So, for me, if the person has good credit and they have a good credit history and they're making enough money to cover, the lease, if they lose their job, they're not going to just screw you over in most cases, so they're either going to get another roommate, if there's two people living there, maybe they move in a third person, or they're going to move out. Like I've had a tenant lose her job just last year, and she just said, listen, I lost my job. And I said, listen, I'm going to get somebody in there and I'm going to get you moved out of here. And it just was perfect, right? She got moved back in with her parents. I got a tenant in. Everything worked out fine. Most people aren't going to say, well, I'm not going to pay you. They're just happy that you're letting them out of their lease, and you do want them out of their lease. You want to find somebody else that can pay. So I wouldn't worry too much about that as long as, they have a steady, stable job and they have good credit. You should be okay.
Yeah. The other thing is, the pandemic kind of exposed a lot of things. And one of them was this, when people's income stopped, who had dry powder, who figured it out, and who puts their head in the sand and says, screw you, so there's, and so it is an individual thing. In most cases, my tenants don't even come to let us know. Literally, they just figure it out and go figure out another source of income because they don't want to move and they don't want to, why deal with a landlord? If the landlord only cares, and you should only care if they're paying. And that can come from lots of ways. And so the individual is their credit history, if they've been evicted, all those kinds of things are very important. That's why you run a criminal credit background check.
Yeah. And I had another, tenant that they were tighter and he lost his job, and they asked, we're going to be late on rent because, we had 2 weeks of looking for work and all this stuff. So they were able to do a 2-week payment plan and pay me within 2 weeks. And so as a landlord, if somebody's trying to work with me, I'm very flexible on that as well. And very understanding because it's stressful to lose your job and rent's a huge payment of that. So, there's just got to be a give and take when it comes to everything. So
things come up with people and you got to work with them. You don't want to get into an eviction scenario.
Or make them move out if they don't want to move out, because you're going to have vacancy trying to get somebody else in.
Just work with them.
Now, a Desire is asking, Ken, how do you handle, and a few people have been asking about this, so I want to address this. How are you handling increases in taxes and insurance? Because what's happening is it's making people's properties not cash flow.
Yeah, it's bad.
On top of the debt.
I know, guys, this is a biggie. We're dealing with this. This is probably our biggest issue we have at our company. We're seeing insurance go up 40%. So it's big. And so the only thing you can do is pay it and figure out ways to increase your occupancy, increase your rent if you can, increase your other income, and or cut in other areas. And so that's what we've had to do. We've had to, tighten the screws down on some of the other expenses. I don't know if you have the ability to do that, but you have to look at the whole picture because there's not a lot you're going to be able to do. Now, there are some things you can do on insurance. You can increase your deductible. You can lower your coverage, but you got to be careful of that. But what you could do is you could self-insure certain pieces. So as an example, if your deductible is $1,000 or $5,000, you can make it 10 and your premium should go down. And then you could, you're going to be self-insuring and you would never turn any those kinds of claims over. But property taxes are something you can appeal, of course. But, this is a big deal. This is a result of costs going up, guys. And it's a reality in a lot of areas. It's digging into people's cash flow.
Yeah. Yep.
It's
Absolutely.
A great question. Really astute question. I wish I had a better answer for you, but that's how we're solving. We're building up more reserves. And don't forget the lender, if they're impounding your taxes and your insurance, they're going to be doing it for you anyway. So shop around, and this is a great time to shop brokers. and look for ways to lower those prices. And by the way, I did a podcast on this with an insurance broker about a few months ago. If you guys want to go look for that, it's really, really good. Some information about what's going on with the insurance business.
We'll have Steve put it here in the show notes,
yep.
and after we get off here.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we will see you guys next week for Labor Day. Next week, right? Yeah, next week's Labor Day.
We'll be in Asheville, North Carolina.
So we'll see you guys then.
See you guys.